As Israel's war on Gaza rages, chances of normalising its ties with its neighbours are fading. Even those with diplomatic relations are facing growing domestic pressure, and allies in Europe are distancing themselves. So is there any way for Israel to regain its place in the region and beyond? This is Inside Story. Hello again, I'm James Bays. Nearly every state in the Middle East has condemned Israel's war on Gaza. Saudi Arabia says normalising relations with Israel hinges on a Palestinian state. Jordan, Egypt and some Gulf nations have diplomatic ties with Israel, but have criticised it publicly. In Europe, a growing number of countries are recognising Palestine, and the EU is reviewing economic relations with Israel. But are words enough to make Israel stop killing and starving Palestinians? And what would it take for countries to cut ties with Israel? I'll put those questions to our guests, but first this report from Imogen Kimber.
Saudi Arabia has condemned Israel's plan to seize Gaza City. The regional heavyweight has repeatedly stated that Israel is violating international law. Last year, the Saudi Crown Prince accused it of committing genocide in Gaza. The two nations were allegedly in discussions about normalising relations. But since October 2023, talks have been suspended and Riyadh has drawn a red line.
Normalisation with Israel can only come through the establishment of a Palestinian state. Only through the establishment of a Palestinian state and only through addressing the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination can we have sustainable peace and real integration in the region.
Jordan and Egypt have peace deals with Israel, but both have condemned its latest plans and labelled the war on Gaza as genocidal. In both countries, public opinion appears to be firmly in support of Palestinians. However, neither has made official changes to diplomatic relations. Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates and Morocco normalised ties with Israel in 2020 under the Abraham Accords. They too have criticised Israel publicly, but relations have not changed. Trade between the UAE and Israel is worth more than $2 billion a year. In Europe, Germany is one of Israel's strongest supporters, but it suspended the sale of weapons that Israeli forces could use in Gaza. Last year, it exported military equipment worth $500 million to Israel. The EU is reviewing economic ties with Israel, while Norway and the UK have sanctioned right-wing ministers Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich for their role in Israeli settler violence in the occupied West Bank.
Mr. Smotrich said, "There is no such thing as a Palestinian nation." Mr. Ben-Gvir has spoken of his rights in the West Bank, a territory his government is occupying, as being more important than the rights of millions of Palestinians.
And a dozen European countries are either recognising or planning to recognise a Palestinian state. So Israel is losing support in the court of public opinion. But so far, diplomatic relations remain unchanged, as do Israel's policies and its genocide in Gaza. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's discuss all this further with our guest today. And joining us from London is Daniel Levy, President of the US Middle East Project and a former Israeli negotiator. In Brussels, James Moran, a former European Union ambassador to Egypt and Jordan. And in Amman in Jordan is Jawad Anani, a former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Jordan. Thank you, all of you, for joining us today on Inside Story. Jawad, if I could start with you, take you back to May when President Trump was here in this region, in the Gulf. He said the dawn of the bright new day awaits the people of the Middle East. And he was talking about further normalisation on top of the Abraham Accord countries, more countries normalising with Israel. Do you think that's going to happen anytime soon, given what's happened in Gaza since May?
I am beginning to be skeptical about that because there is a very delicate position that many Arab leaders find themselves squeezed into. On the one hand, if they displease America, they are in for some trouble. And if they displease their people, then they will have also troubles at their hands. In a way, it is a Gordian knot. I don't know how they will deal with it, but it is a very tough and contradictory situation.
Because, Daniel, even now, Israel talks up this idea of normalisation, doesn't it? It says it's just round the corner. More countries will be signing up to deals in the Abraham Accords, including the big prize from the US and Israel's point of view, which, of course, is Saudi Arabia.
Exactly, James. And what I would probably encourage us to do is distinguish between two things. First of all is the absolutely justifiable and considerable frustration that more is not being done by regional states. The leverage is not being applied financially and in other ways. Those who have normalized, the Abraham Accord states, haven't changed that relationship. States are playing this game of being part of the airdrop of aid, where that's not sufficient. It's not what's needed. Israel is trying to play with our expectation, because of this frustration, our expectation that everyone is just waiting to sell out the Palestinians, which is part of the history. And Israel uses that to do what I would suggest is a spin and disinformation game. It wants us to believe that more normalization is just around the corner. So it will spread stories that Indonesia, the largest Muslim majority state, we're in secret talks, it's about to happen. Utter nonsense, not happening. That Saudi normalization is just around the corner. Also not happening, because it wants to push back against the idea that there is increasing pressure to denormalize by getting everyone suspicious of each other. And I would suggest, with all the frustration and with all the need to push these states to do more, that we don't fall into that trap. Sure, the US is going to try and use its leverage, this criminal administration, like its predecessor, what they did with Morocco over recognition of Western Sahara, what they seem to be offering Somaliland over recognizing to take in Palestinians. They will try to use that leverage. One doesn't have to fall for it. There's a shifting geopolitics in the world. And if I may, James, I almost feel like we have to pause and reflect and take a step back, because it seems surreal and upside down to even be asking the question that you correctly posed, James, which is, how can we even be having a conversation about having closer ties in the midst of Israel conducting this genocidal assault? And then people may say, well, precisely because we live in a world where power, even destructive power, is respected. But I would put it to you that Israel's attempt to pursue a hegemonic regional project where it offers no constructive vision, where it offers the total victory and destruction of the Palestinians, where it threatens every state coming to a neighborhood near you is our destructive power. I don't think that project can hold, but it is, of course, up to regional states to demonstrate that it can't hold, and ultimately to put together some kind of alliance that can also challenge Israel's ability to act without constraint militarily.
James, since we've had this news of the Israeli Security Cabinet saying that they are going to seize control of Gaza City and occupy it, I think we've had a pretty familiar pattern. We've had stronger language and condemnation coming from all of the Arab countries. And yes, the language has been getting tougher over the last 22 months, but not really any sign of any actual action from any of these countries. You used to be the EU ambassador to Egypt. President Sisi said this plan would trigger a new catastrophe. And then at the same time, it's worth noting on Thursday, Egypt signed a record $35 billion gas deal with Israel.
Yeah, well, I mean, Egypt, James, and good afternoon to you and your guests. Egypt is in a weak position. It always has been, I'm afraid. Its room for maneuver is pretty limited. It has, of course, the peace treaty with Israel. There has been quite a lot of talk in Egypt about suspending that treaty on the basis of the violations that we've seen in the last couple of years, but that's not about to happen. I don't think Egypt's a big player here. But I would say one thing, and here I don't want to be, as we say in English, the pot calling the kettle black, because Europe doesn't have a great deal of credibility when it comes to sanctions and the rest of it. But one thing I think that would be useful, it seems to me at this time, would be that those who have already signed the normalization agreements with Israel, that's Bahrain and the Emirates, Morocco, Sudan, and so on, whether they would consider suspending those so-called Abraham Accords to send a message clearly to the Israelis that that's enough.
Okay, James, can I just come back just to be clear, James, if you don't mind, just be clear with us why Egypt is in such a weak position. It signed its peace deal with Israel 44 years ago. I am assuming because of the United States and Egypt relying on the US for military and financial support.
Well, it's partly that, but it's also because, of course, you remember the original reason why they went into negotiations was to get the Sinai Peninsula back under Egyptian sovereignty, which, of course, was the essential point of that treaty. Yes, they've had military aid over the years since then from the US, and it has been important, not just from the point of view of money, but also from the point of view of technology and know-how and so on. But these days, Egypt has a pretty widespread set of relationships around the world. It does, though, have this important relationship with Israel when it comes to fossil fuels. And you mentioned already the new deal that was signed the other day. This, of course, is a big hope for Egypt for the future. And cooperation with Israel on that is important to them. And in terms of taking real action by Sisi, I don't think that's about to happen.
Jawad, your country, Jordan, has had a peace deal with Israel for 30 years. It was part of the aftermath of the Oslo Accords, which were supposed to lead to a two-state solution. Netanyahu's never believed in those, has he? And he basically has ripped them up completely now. What is the feeling in Jordan, particularly on the street, about what the King of Jordan should do now? Are there people saying there's no point having this peace treaty anymore?
Well, Jordanian people have expressed themselves by not dealing with the Israelis and they're trying to minimize that to the lowest possible level. Most of the deals that are taking place actually are institutional arrangements like the gas that we take from Israel or any other projects which deal with water, which have been suspended. Even Jordan had to suspend, this deal of sending Israel solar energy in return for water. That project, which Jordan needed very badly, is now suspended and on hold. So therefore, yes, they feel that there is an urge to express anger and do some action in the process. But the problem is not Israel. Basically, Netanyahu, to be honest with you, is loathed in Jordan. I mean, nobody likes him. And I know that for sure. So in a way, the question is, and because he has squandered all the possibilities of peace that late King Hussein used to dream about. So in a way, we are yet faced with the problem of the United States supporting Israel blindly, without any checks, without any pressures at all. On the contrary, they think that when it came to the occupation of Gaza, President Donald Trump had said that we will leave it up to the Israelis. What do you mean leave it up to the Israelis? That has nothing to do with your plans in the Middle East? Then what are we talking about? Why is it important, for instance, to be so jubilant about the peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia, yet you drag your feet and you don't do anything except probably some humanitarian expression when it comes to the Palestinians in Gaza? Why? I mean, after all these massacres that have been witnessed and attested to by all international organizations, even the European position, whether it becomes stronger or not, but at least they have finally come to the conclusion in Brussels that they should really express abhorrence at the occupation and the idea of occupying Gaza. And without any obvious plan in the horizon or anywhere. What do you do with 2 million and something people? This is a very dire situation. And I don't think that we are producing the goodies that can deal with it.
OK, Daniel, we've talked about those two countries that have had long-term peace deals, Egypt and Jordan. Let's bring in the Abraham Accords 2020, the deal with UAE, Bahrain, then Morocco. Sadly, because of the war in Sudan, we probably leave that out of the conversation. Do these countries have leverage right now? Because it seems to me the two things that could change Netanyahu's mind would be Trump or Israeli public opinion. Now, Trump cares a lot about those Abraham Accords. If they were his biggest achievement in his first term, diplomatically, he says. If countries started to threaten to suspend, that would get to President Trump, wouldn't it? And I'm guessing, but you know this better than me, that the Israeli public would be somewhat unnerved if countries said they were thinking of dropping their diplomatic ties.
Absolutely. But let's remember that these Abraham Accords were explicitly and very frankly put forward by Israel as how not to deal with the Palestinian question. We get peace while we do whatever we want with the Palestinians. And of course, peace with countries with whom Israel was not at war. So the whole idea that these were peace accords. What you have now is that some said, well, once they've done deals with Israel, they will have some say and some sway. And what has happened subsequently has really proven Netanyahu's narrative, which is we can get away with anything. And what those accords did, intentionally or otherwise, was they created an even more permissive environment in which Israel could operate. And when it came to the biggest test, the test of genocide, as defined by many of the most important legal scholars, many Palestinians, Israeli human rights organizations, under genocide, nothing was revisited in those relations. So this is a huge win for Netanyahu. Does that mean they have leverage? Absolutely. Do others also have leverage? Absolutely. I don't think it's that comfortable for them to have Israel going on this assault. I think that many recognize Israel is in overreach. It's also hard to sustain this in Israel when you have a divided society. They are losing the informational, psychological, cognitive war around the world. I think that's partly why the Israeli military is not happy with Netanyahu's latest plan. But that can only be brought home if states like the Abraham Accord states act differently. And the counterpoint to Abraham Accords is something like the Hague Group, where countries in the global south have come together and say, we will not be complicit in genocide. We will be faithful to our obligations as members in good standing of an international community that respects international law. And they have put in a trade embargo, arms embargo. But that's a small number of states thus far. We need to build up that and build down normalization.
James, when President Trump was asked about the possible Israeli takeover of Gaza City, he said, oh, I'm just trying to get people fed. It's pretty much up to Israel. I mean, do these Arab states need to explain clearly, and anyone need to explain clearly, to President Trump how much worse the humanitarian situation could get if Netanyahu goes ahead with this next stage of his plan?
Well, yes, but I don't really think that Mr. Netanyahu cares very much about the humanitarian situation in Gaza. That's been clear for quite some time.
But Trump might.
Trump might. On the other hand, the remarks made yesterday by Trump essentially saying that when it comes to the occupation of Gaza City, you'll have to refer yourself to the government of Israel, was, I thought, frankly speaking, rather pathetic. I mean, there was no position given for the US other than to say, well, basically, we will follow, the implication anyway, we will follow whatever Israel does. And this, of course, plays into the argument that has been made for many, many years that if you want to understand US foreign policy in the Middle East, go first to Jerusalem, then to Washington.
Jawad, you mentioned at the beginning the trap that Arab nations feel they're in, that they've got very little room for manoeuvre. I think it probably is worth us remarking on the fact that under the Biden administration, the plan for the future of Gaza, the Biden-Blinken plan, was not all that different from the Arab plan. Now, of course, the Israeli plan, it seems, is to take control, maybe push out the Palestinians, saying that they were leaving voluntarily. And Trump seems to be he's talked in the past about the Riviera, but he seems to be happy for Israel to do whatever it wants. I mean, they're no longer aligned in any way, the US and the Arab states, in terms of the future of Gaza, are they?
No, they are not. I mean, what is to align with anyway? I mean, if Mr. Trump had said that we will make it a Riviera, and now everybody agrees to the idea that this is Gaza's soil is not even ready to grow anything. I mean, it has been intoxicated beyond use. So what are we going to do? I mean, the living conditions, environmental impact of this war, and the health impact on the people of Gaza is a real big concern. But at the same time, it indicates that no matter what the price that the Israelis are exacting out of the Palestinians, the end result is that we will have no land and to utilize for anything that is useful. It is not going to be inhabitable. These are good reports that come from respectable international organizations who have tested the soil and the water resources and the beaches and the housing. What is there to deal with? So in a way, I think that pinning any hopes on what the President of the United States is saying right now, as far as Gaza is concerned, seems to be just wishful thinking.
Okay, Daniel, let me broaden it a bit from just the Arab countries. I mean, that Blinken plan, the Arab plan, was actually pretty much the same as the outcome document that came from a big meeting at the UN General Assembly. That, again, talks about the Palestinian Authority taking control with international partners, maybe some peacekeepers and a huge amount of international reconstruction money. I mean, and that included many of the Western countries, many of the European countries signed up to that outcome document. Have they got any leverage at all right now?
Should they choose to use it? Absolutely. And therefore, one has to go beyond the plans. It's fine to have plans on the table. One has to go beyond the rhetoric. Israel can flick off plans and they can flick off rhetoric. There was a statement put out by several foreign ministers in response to this new Gaza plan, Western foreign ministers from the UK, Italy, Germany, Australia, Canada, amongst others. And that statement was the same old rhetoric, despite the dire circumstances. The statement actually said, we urge the international community to prevent this. Hold on a minute. Who are you? You're the international community. You're not the International Synchronized Swimming Federation. You are some of Israel's closest allies on whom it most depends. So you start by example and take the necessary action, not just platitudes. End arms trade. Revisit all of your trade with Israel. End settlement trade, but that's the lowest bar. What about visa-free travel? Shouldn't people at least have to sign a declaration that they have not been involved in the committing of war crimes in Gaza to enter your country? What about Israeli assets that are held in your countries? You know, you have experience in freezing those when international law and war crimes are being committed and violated. What about a sports boycott? The list could go on, James. Those countries don't want to do those things. They want to leave this at the level of rhetoric. But if this is going to change, if any of those plans are going to be relevant, if these horrific scenes that we see every day are going to stop, then those actual meaningful measures that will make Israelis question whether this is a way forward that can work for them, these measures have to be taken. And what I would say is, the reason that recognition, which isn't that meaningful, has happened, the reason Germany has had to take one small step is because of the pressure and the message that should send to everyone. Anyone who's been on a march or hasn't yet been on a march, anyone who's signed a petition, anyone who's boycotting a product, anyone who's in a union that is refusing to be involved in loading and offloading material that Israel could use in this genocide. Step up those efforts. Don't despair, because they are working. And if we want to see leverage, we, the people, are going to have to drive it.
James, Daniel there spoke about Germany, which for most of the period of the last 22 months have been one of the most supportive countries to Israel. And yet a change of position from Chancellor Merz. He said, I quote, "The German government will not authorise any exports of military equipment that could be used in the Gaza Strip until further notice." How significant is Germany's position and the fact it's Germany that's taking this stand?
I think it's very significant. It's the very first time, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the first time since the foundation of the State of Israel that Germany has taken any measures of this kind, of any sanction against Israel. It's limited, of course, and lots of questions about how you would define that weaponry and so on. But it is significant. It's highly symbolic that Germany, of all countries, with all of its historical baggage, which drives very much its relationship with Israel, dating back to the last century, Second World War and so on, that Germany would take such a move is very significant and shows you, also going to Daniel's point, the strength of public opinion, which has been very, very intense in Europe and elsewhere for the last month or two. And it just ratcheted up at least one level after what we heard from Netanyahu a couple of days ago about the occupation of Gaza City. So it is significant. It's nowhere near enough. And Europe needs to do more and should do more. And is still discussing it, but unfortunately still can't find a majority. Germany will probably continue to support Israel wherever it can, but you have other countries, notably Italy, which is the pivotal country when it comes to a majority for trade sanctions, for example. Italy's sitting on the fence.
Jawad, do you think with what we're seeing from Germany, we're seeing also imminent recognitions, I think, from some big Western countries that perhaps, and it's slowly, but the tide is turning?
I believe that there is change, regardless of how slow it may be and how much time it would take for it to translate itself into action. But I think a good part of that and the main determinant of the length of time which such a process may take place depends on the Arab position. If Arabs all together take a one unified stand regarding Israel with a specific schedule, deciding the steps one by one, steps of escalation. If Israel continues in the current modus operandi in Gaza and in the West Bank, particularly Jerusalem, then they should take position. If it had been only...
Jawad, I can see Daniel wants to jump in, but it's one of those occasions where we just don't have any more time. So thank you so much for our guests, Daniel Levy, James Moran and Jawad Anani. Extensive coverage of the war on Gaza continues around the clock here on Al Jazeera, and it's always worth checking out all the context and analysis that you can find on our website, aljazeera.com. We want to hear from you too. Go to our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or message us on X, look for @AJ Inside Story. Join me, James Bays, back here very soon. From the team here, please keep safe and well. Bye-bye for now.
Don't miss out on the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.